This is Biblical Insights with Dr. Jim Denison of the Denison Forum, answering today's toughest questions.
Okay, now Jim, we know God is omnipotent, He's omnipresent, He's omniscient. So the question can come up, if He knows everything already, what is the purpose, or why is it that we need to pray?
Yeah, why talk to a God that already knows what you're going to ask, right? And He, in fact, Jesus said in Matthew 6:8 that your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. And so what's the point here? And it's a great question on a logical level and even on a practical level. Why am I telling God what He already knows? If He already knew what I was about to say, why would I need to say it to you? You know, since God is, as you say, omniscient, He knows all things, He's omnipresent, so He's present in this very room right now. He sees the future better than we see the present. The Bible makes all of that very, very clear, that time is no construct in God's world. He created it and He stands outside it. C.S. Lewis said, if you think of time as a line on a page, God's the page. You know, He sees tomorrow better than we see today. Doesn't mean that He makes choices for us necessarily, but He sees the choice when we're making it, knows ahead of time what it will be. And so He knows the future. He knows what we need before we ask Him. But on the other hand, the Bible consistently calls us to pray. 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, pray without ceasing. Jesus said, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. So why do we need to ask of God something He already knows we're going to ask? One wrong answer is that praying earns God's favor. If I just pray enough, if I just believe enough, if I just fast enough, if I just do enough, that I can somehow earn what God might then give me. This sense that we can keep on praying and we'll talk God into it. You know, there's a parable Jesus told that gets misinterpreted in that way. It's in the Gospel of Luke. There's a man that's asleep at night and someone comes and knocks on his door and says, hey, a friend has just come to my house and I'm out of bread. Can you give me some bread? And Jesus says He doesn't want to give up and give him the bread, but because he keeps on knocking on the door, He will. And we can read that to think that if we just keep knocking on the door, we can wear God out. We can eventually talk Him into it. Well, the parable actually is to be interpreted in a very different way. In Jewish culture, there was a thing known as the koi wahomer, which means from the lesser to the greater. And the technique, it was a rabbinic technique, and the technique is this. If a man would get up at midnight and give you bread, even though he doesn't want to, just because you're knocking on the door, how much more will God answer our prayers if we ask? It's not that we're wearing Him out. It's not that we're earning His favor. It's not that we're talking God into something. So that's the wrong answer to the question, is that we keep praying to earn God's favor. Another wrong answer to the question is that we tell God these things as though He doesn't already know them, because as we've said, He already does. The right answer is praying positions us to receive what grace wants to give. When I pray to God, I'm not informing Him, I'm talking with Him. And when I'm talking with Him, I'm putting myself in position then to receive what He wants to give. You and I couldn't have this conversation unless we were close enough to be able to speak to each other. Being close to each other didn't earn the conversation. It didn't merit it. It just received it. Well, when I pray, I admit that I need God's help. He already knows that I do, but it's my admission of it. The first of every 12-step program is to admit the person's particular issue, whatever it might be. So I admit to God that I need bread, or I need forgiveness, or I need leadership, or I need whatever it is I need. And then in the doing of that, by praying, I'm positioning myself to receive what grace wants to give. I'd say two other things. First of all, praying is a whole lot more about relationship than it is about requests. When I'm praying, I'm connecting with God. That's when God gets His hands on me. You know, if I'm a carpenter and I want to modify a table at home, well, I have to be able to touch it. It's not enough to think about it or talk at it. I've got to be able to sand it and paint it or varnish it. Well, when I'm praying, God is molding me. He's shaping me. So praying is a whole lot more about the relationship with God than it is just the request. And then the other thing I'd say, praying is a lot more about listening than it is just about talking. Mother Teresa said when she began her religious life, she spent 90% of her prayer time talking to God. At the end of her life, she spent 90% of her prayer time listening to God. Praying is about just being with God. You can hear Him speak to you in creation. You can hear Him speak to you through other people or through circumstances. His Spirit will speak to your spirit. Praying is basically about being with God. You can ask Him for things, of course. He tells you to do that. And when you do, you position yourself to receive what He wants to give. But even more than that, it's not just the gift, it's the giver. And it's the relationship that is the greatest privilege of prayer.
Thank you for watching Biblical Insights with Dr. Jim Denison of the Denison Forum. Follow us by clicking below for more answers to today's toughest questions.